Hi everybody, welcome to round 2 of our Sunday doubleheader PC. I'm still Regina, this is still Jesus, and this is still Pax. I forgot to introduce him last time. But we're gonna get right into it. Alberto, Lara versus Bryan Kim. So, if you don't know Alberto's team this season, you haven't been paying attention as much, and I'm very sorry about that. But you will be seeing Bryan's side here. You will see a Fluttermane, a Gyarados, you will see a Amoonguss, a Chiyu, a Gothitelle, and you will see Iron Hands. Versus Alberto's, you might have seen it before, but we'll introduce this the same old team one more time. It's going to be that Klefki, Corviknight, Garchomp, Chiyu, Fluttermane, and Roaring Moon.
You have to recall, if you were here yesterday, for those of you that weren't here, Alberto was actually the defending champion of yesterday's Premier Challenge, and Alberto's looking to do what Gavin Michaels did and go back to back.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of actually really important here for Alberto because he does technically need the second win to hit his best finish for this season, right? And like because he's in the day 2 race, every little bit of CP is sort of important because the CP for this season also counts for the travel award for both for Worlds and for next season's the Latin America International Championships as well. So this is actually kind of every little CP sort of like helps right here for Alberto. So that is why we are seeing him, and hopefully for him, right, he's hoping for a second win like 2 days in a row. So we're gonna see if Bryan's gonna be able to possibly put a little bit of a wrench in that plans because they're both 1-0 right now. And honestly, Bryan, has won one of our events before as well. Very good player and has showcased that he can definitely roll with the best of them. We are gonna see Fluttermane and Chiyu here as the lead for Alberto versus the Gothitelle and Fluttermane. So the second Gothitelle that we'll be having on the team, but the first time we're actually gonna see it on stream. So able to lock in all those non-ghost type Pokemon and Pokemon that don't have pivot moves.
Yeah, I was gonna say that Shadow Type's only trapping the Chiyu right now, and Fluttermane can actually get out of there pretty quickly, but the Arc Pulse for the Chiyu looks very good against the Gothitelle if it doesn't go for the Terrestrialization. And for looking both teams, I mean, we've seen Alberto's bulky offensive team that he tries to set up and from the Klefki support, but we see here no Klefki, and then Bryan, you see his team's mostly just an offensive variation of a balanced team.
Yeah, what's really interesting is that, like, you're not really able to lock in as much. Like, sure, that Chiyu's in trouble, but that Chiyu can return fire pretty heavily. And I think really what it comes down to is the Fluttermane on either side of these. Like, right now, because it is game 1, right? You're trying to figure out, like, your speed tiers and figuring out which Fluttermane is going to be the one that's a little bit scarier, right? One has that photosynthesis, one has actually the choice specs, and we have the focus sash. So neither one of them really getting a booster energy here, but we are going to get a terrestrialization.
This is from Bryan.
Yeah, from the Fluttermane, so at least that turn 1 immediately here, so any sort of fairy type move is going to go up here. We're going to get another terrestrialization, and because Alberto's is going second, it's probably going to be that Fluttermane as well, actually. So double terrestrialization, both onto the fairy types for those Fluttermanes. We did see Bryan's go first, so that could be indicative of the fact that his might be just a little bit faster than Alberto's here, but Gothitelle going for the fake out is going to get it down into that Chiyu, going to make sure it doesn't move this turn. Fluttermane from Bryan's from Bryan's side is going to get for the Dazzling Gleam. Doesn't pick up the knockout on the Chiyu, but is able to get a lot of damage down from both of them. However, Alberto's is returning fire with its own Dazzling Gleam. Also does some considerable damage into that Fluttermane on Bryan's side, and obviously the Chiyu is flinching this turn, so that specs damage just doing a little bit more work here.
Yeah, we do see that the differentials between the choice specs and the focus sash being detrimental here, as we do see another Chiyu come in here from Bryan, and I was about to mention maybe Alberto's own Beats of Ruin was probably a factor into how much damage that Dazzling Gleam did, but Alberto not going to take chances with that Chiyu, wants it to stay on the field for another turn, make that Beats of Ruin now affecting both Fluttermanes by double.
Yeah, this is going to be really unfortunate here because that double Chiyu means that Fluttermane wasn't going to go out regardless of what happened because it was in that KO range. So Alberto's going to lose that Fluttermane immediately here with that terrestrialization as well. So, I mean, kind of a rough spot for him right now, but it just sort of depends on what he's going to bring out here. It's going to be like that Garchomp. So Garchomp's just like, hey, you know what, this is okay because it's actually kind of in a pretty good spot, but Bryan has an answer in the back.
Yeah, that Gyarados in the back, that Intimidate, and the ground immunity is going to prove detrimental here. And also the fact that he cannot go for the Dragon Claw against the Fluttermane. So you could probably go for the Dragon Claw into the Chiyu slot, but you'd rather go for a ground type move. And Gyarados looks pretty telegraphed. But also, Fluttermane could just one-shot the Garchomp because of the double beats of ruin and the super effective damage, plus the terrestrialization.
Yeah, Garchomp like not looking super great health, just not looking like it's in a really great spot in the moment. I mean, it's sort of Bryan's like in the driver's seat right now with all the damage he's been putting out, but the Fluttermane is actually going to be switched out this turn, so doesn't really want to have to worry about it getting hit here as Gyarados comes into play, and more importantly brings in that Intimidate against the Gyarados, going to be able to knock down one stage of attack here. So going to try to mitigate a little bit of the damage here on that Garchomp, but Chiyu also leaving the field on Alberto's side. So we are going to see that Corviknight going to be into play. So unfortunately, just because of the way that things were switching out, is not able to return fire with that Mirror Armor. But Earthquake going to be the move that gets locked in here. So Chiyu going to be the only Pokemon here that's going to have to take that damage. Is going to get knocked out alongside a critical hit, which actually might potentially matter here for that Chiyu. We did see Bryan shaking his head. So Fluttermane and Gothitelle, one of them's going to have to come back in for their fallen opponent. But at least that Gyarados comes in relatively unscathed.
Yeah, I almost forgot the fact that Alberto's Garchomp is actually Choice Scarf, so would have probably outspent that Fluttermane, got the revenge KO onto the Fluttermane, and definitely does. That Intimidate did matter potentially against that Chiyu with that Intimidate drop. We do see Fake Out go into the Garchomp. We'll get a bit of rough skin damage, and that's actually enough damage to activate the Citrus Berry.
Yeah, so it's really nice for you because at least you get back a little bit of that health, so you don't have to worry about getting knocked out on this turn. Garchomp obviously going to flinch because of that Fake Out, but Gyarados going for the taunt against that Corviknight, going to shut down sort of like the bulk up in the Roost as well, but that Corviknight, you know, not falling for it this turn, it was able to go for a Brave Bird, does a considerable amount of damage into that Gyarados, so it's going to take some recoil damage here, but at least Bryan knows, hey, I don't have to worry about bulk up and I don't have to worry about Roost.
And those are the two important things here, because we do see another Earthquake come out. Will damage the Gothitelle. Let's see how much this does. Both Pokemon for Alberto are trapped thanks to that Shadow Tech ability. This does a decent amount of damage. Here's the Waterfall into the Garchomp. Gonna do okay amount of damage. Will take a bit of secondary effect for that Rough Skin. Brave Bird comes out into the Gothitelle. Almost gets the knockout. Gets a bit of a recoil there. Does look okay. At the end of the day, we see the Psychic into the Garchomp. Decent damage.
Honestly, I don't know if that's gonna put it in that waterfall knockout range still, because I got that it's gonna go down before anything else really, so that Gyarados can really only just sort of go for like the waterfall here, but Earthquake, because it is locked in thanks to that Scarf, should pick up a knockout here on that Gothitelle. Gyarados' only damage has really just been from Brave Bird and from Rough Skin damage. Waterfall I don't think should pick up unless it's does. So the Rough Skin though is going to at least add a little bit more damage against that Gyarados. And now we are going to have that Garchomp get knocked out, and Brave Bird going to put in a little bit more work here. And just enough to miss the knockout, unfortunately.
Citrus Berry activates onto the Gyarados. That Rough Skin almost came in to bite Gyarados in the back because of that residual damage that it took. The taunt's gone from the Corviknight, but it's down to a 2v2 between Chiyu and the Corviknight for Alberto, and for Bryan, it's Fluttermane Gyarados. However, depending on the way this Fluttermane's trained, you know, maybe you could get a big Shadow Ball off, because that Beads of Ruin is unfortunately going to be hindering that Corviknight a bit.
Yeah, whatever the big move Bryan chooses to lock into here is what he's going to be locked into the rest of the game. It's actually going to be a Dazzling Gleam, so no Protect from the Chiyu either here is going to get knocked out here. Corviknight taking that very nicely, is able to at least hold on with that HP. Ate that up pretty well. Actually surprised that, you know, you're kind of locking yourself into Dazzling Gleam against a Pokemon that resists it. Corviknight back in the green thanks to its own Citrus Berry activation. As Gyarados goes for the Waterfall, has a flinch potential here as well to stop this Corviknight. But nope, is able to break through that, goes for the Brave Bird into that Fluttermane. Again, like, great choice there, because honestly, you can eat up those waterfalls for days, and you don't really have to worry about any other move from that Gyarados, because we see that it does have Protect, Taunt, and Thunder Wave. So waterfall the only damage dealing that it'll do. Your best bet right now is maybe for flinches. Oh, but the taunt is gonna come out first, so if Alberto that he's able to at least get some damage done, because that Roost would have been really great here for that Corviknight.
Does he go for it? He went for the Roost! Yeah, that probably looked telegraphed us. That was really telegraphed, and yeah, we can see the immediate waterfall. Do we see a flinch here? Yeah, it wasn't going to be enough to knock out. I didn't think it would. No flinch. Does it survive the Brave Bird? It does not.
Yeah, that one was actually pretty close. I'm honestly good on Bryan though for understanding that, hey, if Alberto Roost here, then it's a 100% a game loss for Bryan just because of the fact that, like, yeah, the repo damage will, like, knock it out. But because the Gyarados was knocked out first, it does mean it's a game loss for Bryan first because his Pokemon were all knocked out before Alberto's were all knocked out.
Yeah, I wanted to point that out because that's actually one of the rare instances where the game ends with 0 Pokemon in play.
No, it's definitely super common once, you know, whenever Perish Trap teams are really popular in the meta, like, understanding the speed tiers for something like Perish Song and Shadow Tag is one of the mechanics that, like, lets you understand, okay, whatever Pokemon is on the field after all of these Pokemon get knocked out, the last one that faints is whoever wins. So honestly, like, in the end, right, that speed sort of kind of hurts you there, but the Gyarados getting knocked out first does mean that Bryan has to lose that game.
I'm actually a little bit surprised for Bryan that he didn't go for the Thunder Wave and the Corviknight a little bit earlier. You know, maybe, yeah, the Garchomp was definitely more the threat. And at the same time, that rough skin damage did add up over time, so Alberto definitely did play that Garchomp very well. It's just like, you lost the Flutter Mane Wars. So I think that was the only negative I saw from Alberto's side that Bryan was able to capitalize on, that Flutter Mane with that choice specs, and a lot of help from his own, from Alberto's Chi-Yu indirectly.
Yeah, I kind of want to point out the fact that, like, I think I kind of agree with you with the fact that the Gyarados didn't ever really go for a Thunder Wave because the Garchomp's not touching this Gyarados at any point, right? And so Corviknight sort of like in that end game is more of a problem because it's able to, like, attack you and it's able to, like, recover HP, which in this game, getting that HP back can make all the difference a lot of the times. And I think once you lose your heavy damage dealer, especially with something like that Flutter Mane, where it seems so commanding in the beginning, that endgame is what really matters in the end. And Alberto's always been very good at setting up for an endgame that he knows he can capitalize on. We are going to see a bit of a switch here with that Corviknight and that Flutter Mane. And Gothitelle and Flutter Mane still the lead of choice here for Bryan.
A little bit of adjustment here from Alberto. You know, definitely that Beats of Ruin definitely underplayed against that Flutter Mane. You know, took a lot more damage than you would have liked. Yeah, you had Focus Sash, but you're still taking too much damage from that Beats of Ruin that Flutter Mane pretty much would not appreciate. And once again, we're in the same situation. It's just like, well, Fake Out was a little obvious to the Corviknight, even though it probably won't do any damage. It's more so just do both these Flutter Mane Terastallize out of the Ghost typing that they're both afraid of.
Yeah, well, I think what's really interesting is that even if you fake out the Corviknight here, at least you're stopping it from getting any extra damage onto your Pokemon, right? Because if you don't fake it out, then that's free damage onto your Flutter Mane if you're Bryan, and that's not something you really want to have to happen. I think you're less worried about the Gothitelle being on the field because you have ways around it. But no terrestrialization here from either Pokemon. As Flutter Mane goes for the Dazzling Gleam on Bryan's side, we are seeing it's consistently faster here. Does very little damage to that Corviknight, but Flutter Mane actually returning with a Shadow Ball from Alberto's side is going to do super effective damage. Not enough to pick up the knockout, but here, why, like, you know, faking out into that Corviknight is still a really smart idea because now that Brave Bird wasn't able to pick up the knockout on that Flutter Mane.
Yeah, very smart too, and I'm a little surprised, Bryan. I mean, this is what I was meaning by the both Flutter Mane translation going around the first game, instead of, apart from this one being neither of them being doing it. You know, that Shadow Ball being super effective. We see Gothitelle switch out. That Shadow Ball being super effective is a little bit scary for Bryan because if Chi-Yu ever came up for Alberto there, that probably would have been a one-hit knockout. Now we see the Beats of Ruin come into play with that Dazzling Gleam, which does bait out the Protect for Alberto because Dazzling Gleam would have knocked out.
Yeah, and so neither one, just keeping like their Pokemon non-terrestrialized here, but Flutter Mane on Bryan's side unable to connect with Alberto's because of that Protect, as Corviknight again eating up these Dazzling Gleams for days. Does go for the Brave Bird in retaliation. Is going to pick up that easy knockout here on Flutter Mane because of how little HP it has. And I think Alberto just correctly identifying, hey, these Flutter Mane are going to be the problem here. Everything else I have ways of handling. And Gothitelle, especially, you know, just being a support Pokemon, sure, it's back on the field and has that fake out support, and it's locking in that Corviknight, but Corviknight is one of those Pokemon that it's fine being out on the field for a very long time.
Trick Room's another option that I'm seeing Bryan hover over. You know, you're taking a lot of damage if you do go for, if Corviknight does go for the Brave Bird onto the Chi-Yu because it was pretty lackluster physical defense stat, but Heat Wave can knock out both Pokemon as long as it doesn't take too much damage in return.
Yeah, you might actually see a defensive terroring here from Alberto, but I think Alberto's like, hey, you know what, if I get rid of this Gothitelle, it's not that big of a deal, because the Chi-Yu, again, at this point, if he has a Garchomp in the back, almost anything he has can get rid of that. Yeah, so we are going to see the defensive terror typing with that fire type on the Corviknight, because hey, you see a Chi-Yu and you're like, I don't want that steel typing anymore, and you got rid of like some other problems here, but Moonblast from the Flutter Mane going into the Chi-Yu actually does over half in there, as Chi-Yu returns with a Heat Wave, is able to land attacks on both of them, and no burns on the Flutter Mane, but Corviknight is able to at least eat that Citrus Berry, get back some of that health, is back in the green. Corviknight actually going for Roost here, and Gothitelle is actually free now to go ahead and set up for that Trick Room, but more interestingly, that means that the Corviknight is going to go before the Chi-Yu does in Trick Room.
At the very least, Psychic will be able to go for neutral damage against that Corviknight, but we saw from earlier an earlier Psychic that it did to the Flutter Mane, if I recall that correctly from game 1. It wasn't doing too much damage, so yeah, this Chi-Yu might have a problem, and we're going to see it probably switch out, even though it got a bit of leftovers recovery.
Yeah, what's kind of wild here is that if that Gyarados switches in, it is going to have to worry about the Intimidate getting back to it because of that mirror armor. So Gyarados is going to get switched in for that Chi-Yu on Bryan's side. Didn't want to get knocked out here, possibly from the last, but the Intimidate going to go into the Flutter Mane, which is going to ignore it, and Corviknight is just going to reflect it back at that Gyarados, so the Gyarados is at -1. Flutter Mane protecting this turn was probably afraid of maybe getting attacked by the Chi-Yu again, but Gothitelle going for a Psychic into that Corviknight is going to be able to do some okay damage actually, but body press from that Corviknight, which would have been great into that Chi-Yu, is instead that Gyarados is just going to take that like a champ.
Now you got to consider your terrestrialization options because Chi-Yu still has his available at Grass type, but that's really bad against the Corviknight. You have Steel, which is bad against body press, so, and then you have the Gothitelle, which
is going to be a normal Terra.
Yeah, which is decent, but again, you're just losing the body press, so not a lot of options for terrestrialization. Your opportunities are very limited. You just gotta find out what Alberto has in the bag, and under this Trick Room, this Flutter Mane's not safe anymore.
Yeah, honestly, I think at this point, right, if you're Alberto, you're just gonna sort of play until the end of Trick Room, because once the speed's back in your side, you don't really have to worry about it, but Flutter Mane's actually gonna leave this battlefield here. It's probably gonna be that Garchomp, no, it's gonna be Roaring Moon instead. So Corviknight and Roaring Moon, both peas and pod here. We are gonna get the activation here from that photosynthesis for the booster energy and consuming it. It's gonna be the attack stat that's gonna get boosted here, and does have access to acrobatics, so any acrobatics damage is going to be insane. As Corviknight gets taunted by the Gothitelle, and Corviknight returning with a Brave Bird into the Gothitelle does some decent damage on here, is going to take recoil damage for its troubles, but does have to worry about this waterfall from Gyarados actually going into the Roaring Moon spot, so Flutter Mane lives to see another day.
That Intimidate from the Mirror Armor Reflection actually is mattering against that Roaring Moon, because it actually took it a lot better than I was thinking it would, and again, now we don't see Terra from the Roaring Moon anymore, so the Acrobatics isn't going to be doing as much damage as it wants to, as we see the Gothitelle switch out back into that Chi-Yu. That Taunt's going to stop future Roosts or Bulk Ups, but I don't think Alberto's in a position to even set up that anymore.
Yeah, I don't think he really cares much about it as he does, because the Gyarados is going to have to take that damage from that Brave Bird, and as you can see, the Corviknight's still pretty healthy here, but Thunder Wave from Gyarados connecting into the Roaring Moon, so now you're going to have to pay the paralysis games on top of potential flinches from waterfalls later on, and right now, yep, that Thunder Wave kicking in immediately with that paralysis, so we don't see Roaring Moon move for another turn.
And I wonder if this is the last turn of Trick Room for Bryan, because if it is the last turn of Trick Room, I can see a double protect coming in. You know, you're outspeeding both Pokemon now thanks to that Thunder Wave on the Roaring Moon, so you can get speed advantage with the Chi-Yu. Probably gonna, it's not probably doing a lot of damage to the Roaring Moon because of the Terrestrialization being gone, but you know, it's a possibility if this is the last turn of Trick Room. But if it's 2 turns of Trick Room, then you kind of need to go on the offensive here.
Yeah, the onus is usually on the person using Trick Room to make sure that they capitalize on as much as possible versus their opponent who wants to burn as many turns. And usually you see that through a lot of pivots, but I think here with Alberto, you're just saying, okay, nothing's really in danger for this Corviknight, so like I can keep it in there and like force Bryan to just choose his attacks right now. Chi's gonna get switched out here. We are gonna see that Gothitelle come back, bringing in with it that fake out pressure, and sure, yes, it has access to that shadow tag stuff, but really I think it's Alberto cares less about that more than ever, as we are going to see the terrestrialization now from Bryan, finally bringing it out to play with that steel terrestrialization on the Gyarados, so it is now going to be susceptible to body press, and I think so Roaring Moon, again unable to move. That's 2 turns in a row from the paralysis, as Corviknight is going to be the only one able to attack here. Goes for another Brave Bird into the Gothitelle, slowly chipping away at its own health on top of his opponents.
Citrus Berry pops onto this Gothitelle, going to go ahead and get some recovery back, and I think the only reason Bryan terrestrialized was he thought that the Brave Bird was going to go into the Gyarados slot. We see Waterfall missed a knockout, and the taunt is gone. This Trick Room over, it is over, so Corviknight's very susceptible right now, and I'm pretty sure that turn the Roaring Moon tried to protect.
Yeah, so a little bit of an unfortunate turn for Alberto. It's not that he's out of it at all yet. It's just going to be a little bit tougher for him, right? But Gothitelle going for the fake out into that Roaring Moon spot. So Roaring Moon still unable to do anything at all because of the paralysis and now because of the fake out. Corviknight finally going down after so many turns on the battlefield is going to take with it the paralyzation. So No more terrestrializing here for Alberto, but Roaring Moon is just like, well, I still can't do anything. But Fluttermane comes back out onto the field, is ready to play, is at very, very low health though.
It is. Even though it can get off one more attack before fainting, does a Shadow Ball even threaten to knock out onto the Gyarados? It probably does threaten to knock out on the Gothitelle, but Gyarados, if it stays out a little longer, can play a lot more disruption. And he's not going to take the chance.
Oh, so Alberto choosing to protect this turn on the Fluttermane, as Gyarados also choosing to protect this turn. Says, hey, I don't really have to worry about this, but I don't want to get knocked out here. Gothitelle actually going for a taunt into that Roaring Moon spot, so wants to shut off anything like a Tailwind or future protects really. But Roaring Moon doesn't fall for it, says, I'm going to Throat Chop you instead, is able to finally pick up a knockout on this Gothitelle. So now, even with like the 3 Pokemon that Alberto's left, whatever he has in the back is at least able to switch out freely. But Chi-Yu comes into play here as still a pretty decent health and brings with it that Beads of Ruin.
That's the funniest thing right now, because I don't know if Shadow Ball with that Beads of Ruin actually might lose Bryan the game if Shadow Ball actually ends up being enough to knock out the Gyarados with his Beads of Ruin. We're gonna find out right now.
Yep,
It's gonna land.
Fluttermane taking advantage of his opponent's Beads of Ruin is unable to pick up the knockout here on the Gyarados, but instead activates the berry that Gyarados has as well. Is able to get it up to some decent amount of health.
Oh no, it missed something. It missed something.
Oh no, is able to land half of its heat waves. Doesn't have to worry, like no burns though, just because of like that paralysis. And Roaring Moon has to worry about the flinch of the paralysis. Just another one, but you know, honestly, that turn could have gone a lot worse for Alberto, because thanks to the fact that the Fluttermane was able to avoid that heat wave, is able to go for an attack, and this Gyarados is in just a very precarious spot right now.
See, Dazzling Gleam, this might not knock out the Gyarados. It puts Chi-Yu in range. Let's see what happens here. Another heat wave miss.
No.
It's the Fluttermane again!
Yikes, that Fluttermane is just like, hey, I don't like the heat because I'm already in SoCal all the time. This Roaring Moon is just taking this like a champ. Is finally able to break free of the paralysis and is not worried about the flinches here from the waterfall. So is able to at least finally take out that Chi-Yu. And shakes off the taunt, but the fact that that Fluttermane was able to survive and that Alberto still had one whole Pokemon in the back, that's just rough going there, right?
Yeah, 2 consecutive heat wave misses on the Fluttermane. That probably would have shaken up the battle, but I look back onto Alberto's team. You know, he still had potentially had a guard chomp in the back. You know, if he had the guard chomp in the back, I think it was game over nonetheless, because the Terrestrialization and the Steel, you lose your flying type, and then you're able to touch both the Chi-Yu and the Gyarados for super effective damage. But even if it wasn't the guard chomp, it was looking rough.
It was probably the guard chomp, right? Because at that point, you're just sort of looking at your end game for damage, and we've seen Alberto use that guard chomp to great effect for sort of that damage output. And I think the heat wave misses are a little bit rough, but I don't think that the guard chomp or whatever last Pokemon Alberto had would have cared about those, right?
Yeah,
so.
I probably wouldn't think so. Also, it was very funny how many beats of interact. I want to say the Beads of Ruin hurt both players rather than help them.
Yeah, but that's part of why like the Ruinous Pokemon are so interesting in terms of putting them on team, because they help and hinder both you and your opponent at the same time. So really, that was actually kind of a fun set to watch. So congratulations to Alberto, but Bryan is still technically, and again, we are having 5 rounds, so there is a chance that X2s can also make our top 8 cut. But we'll see you all for round 3 in a little bit. I'm gonna forget how to count at some point today. But yeah, we will see you guys all for round 3 in a little while.